Well, to answer your question, your first question, I'm kind of torn. I heard you talking about Davis, and I tend to want to put Davis in there if now John Gannon said otherwise. Are you going to call your defense differently? No, not really. Well, I don't really believe him. If he does change the way that his defense is called because of this particular player, that could have a big impact on everybody else, which means to me, the guy that I'm really excited about seeing would be Nakobe Dean and how a linebacker will finally look playing in this defense.
A Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Go ahead, punch that like button. Give your boys Mac a little love. We could use it. Help with our algorithm or whatever the hell you do on YouTube. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks to Mike Gill, our buddy from down the shore at the Sports Bash, for hopping on with us. Last minute addition to the lineup. We had Mike a little bit late today, but he said, damn, I'll get up for you guys. Mr. Gill, how are things down the shore?
So you're lucky that I'm a guy who gets up and walks the beach early in the morning. So you got me, I'm up, I'm done, I'm back, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, there are worse things to get to be able to walk the beach. So that's,
it's a little windy down here today, fellas.
That's nice. We want a little breeze. I like a little breeze. So thrilled to have you with us. I saw you in the green room. Jody and I were kind of discussing. So we'll start there. The most important acquisition for the Philadelphia Eagles in all, it's obviously Jaquiski Tartt, but besides Tartt, if you were to say all the big name additions, the A.J. Browns, the Hassan Reddicks, the James Bradburys, you probably heard me waxing about Jordan Davis and his potential impact on this particular defense. Who do you think is the biggest piece that Howie Roseman has added?
By the way, how much content did Tartt give you?
Well, there's this interesting disconnect.
Third day running, Mikey.
Yeah. But I want to talk to you about that too, Mike, because you get to engage with the fan base as well as Jody. So we'll get to Tartt, but you have this interesting disconnect. Some people think he's great.
Yeah.
He's Ronnie Lott coming in, and others, realize, hey, it's mid-June. You're getting a better minimum deal. So I'll throw Tartt into the original question. Maybe he's the most important piece.
Well, to answer your question, your first question, I'm kind of torn. I heard you talking about Davis, and I tend to want to put Davis in there if now John Gannon said otherwise. Are you going to call your defense differently? No, not really. Well, I don't really believe him. If he does change the way that his defense is called because of this particular player, that could have a big impact on everybody else, which means to me, the guy that I'm really excited about seeing would be Nakobe Dean and how a linebacker will finally look playing in this defense. And from all that, we're hearing is he's very smart. He might he might be the guy who's the captain of the defense. I mean, he might be that guy who's all over the field, makes plays. We might not be bringing him up first, guys, because we're not used to seeing a playmaking linebacker on this defense. So I'm hopeful that he's the guy at the end of the year we say, man, what a difference it was bringing in a linebacker for this defense. So obviously, A.J. Brown's got to be at the top of that conversation too. You hope. If not, that's not good. If at the end of the year we're talking about A.J. Brown with 875 yards and 4 touchdowns, we're probably disappointed in what ended up happening. You need a guy to get you 1,200 yards, right? This is what you brought this guy in finally for.
Yeah.
And I think he's got a better chance to get 1,200 than 800. And he better get more than 4 touchdowns. Otherwise, you're right. Your phone lines, my phone lines, our feed here. People will not be happy with that as a production year for Mr. Brown. Some people are suggesting that the Eagles might have an issue on their hands in that there's only one football to go around. That if we want to see Brown get 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns, and we want to see Devontae Smith improve off last year and add to his yards and his touchdowns, we know Dallas Goedert's numbers are going to go up because he had to share it with Ertz for the first 5-6 weeks of the season. and we know the Eagles are going to throw the football more, is Jalen Hurts going to be able to spread the ball around enough to 3 very significant targets this upcoming year?
Yeah, and your buddy Jeff Kerr was on with me Monday and even suggested the Eagles should make a run for Odell Beckham. And I said, well,
come on, Jeff.
Isn't that the problem they had in Cleveland was they just didn't have, you had him and Landry. I mean, there was just the 2 running backs there. You just had too much. Look, I think that this offense is probably made for spreading the ball around with this particular quarterback. You don't have a guy who I think is going to just zone in, lock in on one particular guy. If they run the ball, that should help him kind of find his guy that he feels most comfortable with at some point. And I would imagine you would see the 3 guys, Brown, Smith, Goddard, get a majority of the targets here, and that there would be enough for those 3 guys to go around. You would imagine they're going to throw the ball more than they did last year. But somebody brought this up to me on my show. I think it was a caller that suggested, what if they don't change the offense? What if they run, and that the plays that were in the passing game last year that weren't made by Jalen Reagor, that weren't made by Quez Watkins, and Smith maybe wasn't ready to kind of carry the load himself. What if those same plays are there and you have A.J. Brown making those plays instead of somebody else? Could the offense look similar with just better pieces making those plays that weren't made last year? I thought that was a pretty interesting thought. I don't see them running the ball as much, but are we just writing off that the run game is going to be a big factor in this offense again, specifically with this offensive line? Like, wouldn't that be not utilizing a strength if you didn't continue to use the run in a pretty high volume?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point. I think it would be almost a dereliction of duty if Nick Sirianni went away from the running game completely. This organization led the NFL in rushing. They have a quarterback who was outside of Lamar Jackson, I believe led the league in yards per rushing attempt. Miles Sanders was second at 5.5. And it was tied for the top number amongst running backs. Jordan Howard's effective. Boston Scott was effective behind this offensive line. Kenny Gainwell was effective. Mike Gill was effective, I believe. Anybody can run the football behind this offensive line. And A.J. Brown, by the way, already comes from a run-first offense. He was with Derrick Henry. So he's not the kind that's going – he's not going to be the diva type that says, don't run the football. I do think it would be a mistake if the Eagles went completely away from the running game. But here's the problem with that, Mike, and I want to run this by you. You got to make a decision on Jalen Hurts. And, you could say you can kick the can down the road because you still have more time after this season. But again, we keep the assumption that you're always going to be able to strike. It was already proven wrong this offseason because the draft, right? The draft class, not a lot of great quarterbacks. Next year, you have 2 first-round picks again. The draft class is supposed to be better. Who knows who's available on the veteran market? But you can't just always assume that the moment you're ready, the quarterback's going to be there. You have to make a decision on the quarterback of this team. Can you do that just being as run heavy as the Eagles were?
Kind of a interesting, there's a whole other conversation here. By the way, Sam Howell was supposed to be the first pick in the draft. If we were having this conversation,
Carson Strong was some people.
Right. The North Carolina quarterback, he was the number 1 pick. Yeah. And he wasn't even a first-round pick with it all. So things could change. You're right about that. Number 2, this whole thing.
Let me disagree with you, Gill. Spencer Rattler was supposed to be the number 1 pick in the draft.
Spencer was in the conversation. Yeah.
Hal was in the conversation, but Spencer Rattler is playing for who now?
South Carolina. He's already
South Carolina. Right. How about going from number 1 pick in the draft, Oklahoma? Yeah, you're a Gamecock now, Spencer. Yeah. Good job by you. All right. Sorry to interrupt, Mike. I apologize.
But, there's only so many guys that can play this position. You're always looking for this ghost that I always say that really doesn't exist, this franchise quarterback. There's only so many of them. So it depends, John. What's the line of demarcation of success that you feel like we're winning with this guy, right? We're winning games. We're making the playoffs. We go deep in the playoffs. Is it, look, San Francisco said Jimmy G got us to the Super Bowl, but we just don't think you can win that one game, so we have to replace you. So how far or what does it take for the Eagles to say, you've got us as far as you can get us, but we have to make a change because that's it. I remember I was having, I'll name drop here, right? I was having dinner with Rod Thorne one night. He's a West Virginia guy, okay? So the two West Virginia compadres are having a conversation, and he says, we just thought that Andre and Thad and that group, that was as far as they were going to get us. They did a great job, but they got us as far as we thought we could go. That was it. They traded for Andrew Bynum because they didn't think that group could get them any further. So how far do the Eagles brass feel? Let's say Jalen Hurts takes them to the NFC Championship game and they lose. Do they say, he got us to the NFC Championship game? That's great. Or do they say, he got us there, but that's all he is. That's as good as he's going to be. I think it's really how much they value him inside that front office. And I think they value him a lot. I really do. I think if he got him to the NFC Championship game, I can't imagine that they would be looking to replace him. Do you agree?
It comes down to you defining he got them too. Like, did Jimmy G get the 49ers to the championship game last year? Or was it the Niners defense and their coaching staff?
Yeah, but that's where I feel like some of these teams, that's where I feel like some of these teams have flawed mind. Like, if that's the style of your team, what's the difference who the quarterback? You know what I'm saying? If the problem is,
well, here's the difference, Mike.
People don't want to keep that style of play. They don't want to be that style, even though that style fit them.
That's fair, because Kyle Shanahan, there's some ego there. Everybody knows who watches this show. I have tremendous respect for Kyle Shanahan. I think he's the best play caller in the NFL, but he's got an ego. He decided on the way to the Super Bowl, when they made the Super Bowl, that he wanted to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. And I tell Jody all the time, it was in the divisional round against Minnesota. He threw this terrible interception. I think it was Eric Kendricks who picked it off, and he just stopped throwing the ball. He turned into a run-first team in the playoffs and just out-physicaled everybody, got it all the way to the Super Bowl. And, oh, by the way, should have won the Super Bowl, but they kind of crapped the bed in the fourth quarter.
By the way, wasn't it Jaquiski Tartt who dropped that interception in the NFC Championship game?
Last year,
Last year, yes.
Tartt, but they've made, with Jimmy Garoppolo, they've made the Final Four 2 out of 3 years. Then 1 year they didn't. It was because of injuries and Nick Bosa getting hurt and all that.
Yeah.
They've a great team. And they're really, if you want to talk about the template of what the Eagles are trying to build in, they're trying to build into being the 49ers with the limited quarterback, but they have a good roster, good talent. And the 49ers have proven you could make significant runs. But through the whole run of the 49ers, the head coach knows he's got to get better at quarterback. Is it better to understand that and always be trying to do it, and we'll see what Trey Lance does? Or is it better to be hemming and hawing and saying, let's wait and see?
Jody, you're a baseball guy. Isn't this city the perfect city? The Phillies won the World Series with Jamie Moyer and Joe Blanton. They go out and get Cliff Lee and Roy Halladay, and they can't get out of the playoffs.
Back to the World Series, yeah.
Right. Sometimes, like this, we're so enamored by the next best thing, and sometimes the next best thing or the best thing isn't what's right for your situation. And I feel like if you have a defense and you have a run game, and a quarterback who can just make like when they got Donovan, it wasn't, hey, throw the ball 55 times. It was run around, make a couple plays. Make a couple plays with your legs, throw one deep down the field. Hopefully Pinkston runs underneath of it because that's what kind of team we are. Now, they never won a Super Bowl with that, but they had a ton of success. Sometimes you're always thinking about what you really want to be when you have something in front of you that if you just keep going with that style – and continuity and keep building towards something. It's like, do you want to win the Super Bowl this year, or do you want to think about winning the Super Bowl 3 years from now? Which one is your goal here? What is your, what is the pie in the sky here? The 2022 Super Bowl or the 2025 Super Bowl? Sometimes you're trying to serve too many masters, and then you end up with nothing.
All right, since you went there, I'm going to take even further down that rabbit hole with one of my favorite hypothetical questions. Jalen Hurts is good enough. He's not top 10, but he certainly improved. And the Eagles, because in part what Jalen Hurts brings to the table, but an improved defense and can still run the ball effectively with the best offensive line in the league. All those things are into the mix. The Eagles make the championship game, and the Eagles go, I heard Mike Gill. He made a great point that you're really going to break something up that's getting you to a championship game. So the Eagles make their mind up. We're giving Jalen Hurts another year. Now we got to deal with the whole, what do you do with the contract? Do you pay him or not? We're not even going to deal with it. We'll put that aside too.
Right.
Jalen Hurts is the quarterback for 2023, and everybody in the NovaCare complex is happy about it. They got 2 first-round draft picks this year coming up. Major speculate. We don't know where they're going to land. We don't know who's going to play how well this year. I'm asking Mike Gill to look 12 months in the future into his crystal ball. What 2 positions would you say the Eagles would most lean toward using that first-round draft pick on? If you want to combine the 2 and move up and go, Jody, no, they need 1. They got 1 positional need, and it's so important. I would give both of the draft picks to move up because, oh, by the way, the Eagles, we got the Eagles doing well because Jalen's playing well, and I think the Saints are going to be okay. John and I disagree on this a little bit. John thinks the Saints made a mistake by doing some of the moves they made this year with a first-year coach who didn't win his first time as a head coach in the NFL. I actually think they're going to be, if Jameis stays healthy, I think they're going to be above 500. But you combine the 2 picks to get up to number 7, number 8. You can take just 1. Which way would you go, 1 or 2? And if you're going 2 and or 1, what are the positions we're talking about?
Well, the Saints thing's interesting because at a time, Jameis Winston was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So again, just because you get a quarterback up there doesn't necessarily mean you're taking a guy that's really changing the whole fortunes of your franchise here. Now, the Saints have a very good offensive situation, so I think they'll probably be like a 9-8 type of team or somewhere in that range. I don't think they're going to be completely crashing, but oh man, how does this season go? Really, I mean, you have a situation where it's hard to answer that question based on we don't know what the season is. I would have to imagine, though, you're going to look for another edge rusher to replace like Brandon Graham, that whole crew. So probably somebody in that mold that will be that new edge rusher, that will be the guy on your defensive front, that will basically be the anchor of that defense. So then you have Jordan Davis, you've got this new end, Nakobe Dean. I can't imagine they draft a safety in that first round. So I would imagine you possibly package to move up to go get that home run, slam dunk defensive end that is that disruptor for your defense. So now you have, that group up front, the linebacking core, oddly sounds like it, with Dean, and hopefully, you got Davion Taylor, who was a young kid who possibly could be, I don't know what to think of him. I mean, he was a guy they liked last year, then he gets hurt. Yeah. He's very athletic. But if you have Dean and Taylor, those 2 guys are very athletic, playing in this linebacker. I guess corner would be the other spot. You got to figure out what to do. You got Slay, who's getting older. Bradbury's probably just a stopgap. So I would think defensive end and corner would be those spots if you have those 2 picks. And if you only have one, if you're going to package them together, if there's one or the other that stands out, you probably make the trade to go get that standout player at corner or defensive end.
One of either of those 2. Gotcha.
Always, with the Eagles, it's easy. Always default to offensive and defensive line. You're most likely going to be correct no matter what.
I guess too on the offensive line. I mean, at some point, Lane Johnson's going to be getting into that Jason Kelce realm where almost every year you're wondering when that's going to be it for him. Your left side seems pretty good for the next 10 years, you hope. The center spot, they took care of the draft this year, they hope. I guess right guard will be something they look at in training camp. If Driscoll wins that position, and he's a younger player, you probably have him for the next 4, 5, 6 years. So I guess right tackle would be the only other spot in the line that you would value that high in the draft that you would, consider.
Howie, no matter how many times Howie says it, and he says every year, if it's even, he defaults, and he said it again this year when he took Juergens at 51. If it's even, and the Eagles claim it was even at that point for Juergens and Nakobe Dean, he's always taken the offensive team. Always, always, always. And nobody will listen to the poor guy. So it's always a good bet, at least from a prop standpoint, to go offensive, defensive line with the Eagles at the top of the draft.
I didn't say quarterback, Jody.
Yeah. Now, continuity, and that's where we're going.
Hypothetical rules.
What you did mention before, Mike, is continuity with this particular team. They did sign a lot of guys to 1-year deals, 1-year prove-it deals. And, that's part of doing business in the NFL. That's kind of how you fill spots. You put the Band-Aids on. You mentioned Bradbury. Look, if he plays well, he's going to get a lot of money. Kaiser White's on a 1-year deal. Tartt's on a 1-year deal. You almost have to start thinking about remaking the secondary if you're looking forward. But my question for 2022 is, do you think the Eagles lean a little bit too heavily on these 1-year deals? Or is it just, the way you should be doing business?
No, in fact, I talked about this the other day in I was in our Football at 4 segment with Jeff Mosher. We brought this up that this offseason feels very much like what they did in 17. I feel like they said, look, that was our blueprint. I think the last couple of years, and I think Howie admitted this, we thought we had this window and we did some things that we wouldn't normally do because we thought we were right there and we went for it and it backfired on us. And we had a 4-10-12 season because of it. I think they went back to the blueprint and said, what did we do that helped us win? And started to go back down that road and said, look, we drafted these guys, we built the lines, and then we filled in these other spots with these 1-year prove-it deals in hopes that those guys, Patrick Robinson had a career year. LeGarrette Blount came in. He had a huge impact. Chris Long came in. He had a big impact. So it feels very similar that they said, let's bring in these guys, 1-year deals, make them prove it. Also, what gets lost in the sauce, too, you got Tartt, been to a Super Bowl, started 64 games, started in the NFC Championship game, played on a good team. Even if he doesn't start, he's creating competition for Epps and Harris that they both don't just get handed a job, and it makes it a more competitive atmosphere in training camp. If you don't have him there, who's challenging Epps and Harris for that safety spot? So there's a lot of moves that are similar to that road that they said 1-year deals, these guys need to prove it. We're using them to help the guys that we've invested in perform better, and you hope it all clicks and you get the right guys like they did that time. So, no, I think the 1-year deal – look, all sports should be giving out 1-year prove-it deals. I mean, come on, these 5-year deals – somebody told me Gene Segura signed a 5-year deal 5 years ago, and you think he was 5 years younger, and you're like, he's still on that deal. Like, these 5-year deals, 10-year deals, I mean, how different are you from 10 years ago?
Well, Bryce Harper only signed a 13-year deal, so we can take it to its ultimate goal. I got to give you credit, Gill, because you start down a rabbit hole and you let me take you continually down it. At my next question, you led right into it. Camp competition. I'll give you the spots. Linebacker, 3 for 2, Edwards, Dean, White, only 2 guys on the field at the same time. Who's going to get the most snaps? 2 out of those 3 guys. Safety, well, besides Tartt, who's going to be a Pro Bowler. Where is the competition going to go? Who's going to win? Who's going to get the most starts? Wide receiver 3, the teacher's pet, Zach Pascal. How much is he going to cut into Quez Watkins as their number 3 wide receiver? And right guard, which I think Sayamalu's going to grab it, and there's not going to be a competition, but some people truly believe there will be a competition there. what's going to be the best? I made you go 10 months in advance to next year's draft. I'm only taking you 2 months down the road here, Mike. In camp, what's going to be the best competition for a position starter for the Eagles this year?
I think linebacker is the most – linebacker is the most fascinating in terms of they finally have multiple guys that you're interested in. Now, I was on with you guys right after they signed Kaiser White, and I was a big fan of that deal. I think he got one up by getting Dean, and now I'm interested to see how they work him into the lineup. I'm wondering if they would have signed White had they known they could get Dean in the third round. You got Davion Taylor, who they seem to like, is maybe the most athletic guy of that group, but was hurt last year. And we obviously know his story with the lack of football experience he has. So there's his strike. Edwards is the guy that you're almost like, man, there's some of these other cool toys. He just seems like the safe toy, but he might be the best toy. He's the one that doesn't get you injured. You know, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. Not with Edwards. He's the guy who's going to basically keep you in tow. So they've got a lot of interesting decisions at that linebacker spot. I'm really interested in that. But what I'm also interested in is how does John Gannon utilize the defensive line? Is it a rotation? Who plays together? Fletcher Cox and Hargrave and Jordan Davis, they don't seem to match together so much. Do they play them in pairs? Is it, hey, we're going to go old school with Fletcher and Javon, and then you guys are going to come out and it'll be Jordan and, somebody else together. We're going to go 3, Jordan on the nose with Sweat and Reddick. How he kind of designs his fronts, I think, is maybe not a competition, but certainly something to keep an eye on in terms of even Derek Barnett, who I know we talked about when they signed him, is this is a guy who was a first-round pick, gets to the quarterback, started. If he just doesn't make the penalties, you're probably not as angry at this guy. But if he's playing in a role where he's just rushing the passer and a guy like Jordan Davis is sucking up 2 blockers, can Derek Barnett get 8 sacks? You say no. Okay.
Yeah, Jody is not the biggest. He's not the president of the Derek Barnett fan.
Nor am I, but again, the guy does have some talent. He just
definitely. I'm more towards I just don't see the time. The Eagles are so deep on the defensive line.
Yeah,
I don't see where Derek Barnett's going to get the playing time to do something like that.
Here's a question: what room does Reddick go to for his positional coach?
They said that, didn't they, John?
Yeah,
they have
3 rooms. They have changed the coaching staff. Jeremiah Washburn teaches the pass rushers on a daily basis. So what JG calls the overhang players. So that's the Reddicks, the Sam linebackers, and essentially the defensive ends. They're in one room. The interior defensive linemen are with Tracy Rocker. Jody and I were talking about this. This is my theory. They're going to run Vic Fangio's defense, that kind of framework where you have 3 interior players, 2 overhang players on the front.
And he was at OTAs, right?
Vic?
Yeah.
Steve Sarkisian. I didn't see Vic. If he was there, I didn't see him.
Somebody was on, I think it was Adam Kaplan was telling me that Fangio was at one of the practices.
He might have been. I didn't see him if he was there. The Eagles aren't alone. About 35% of the league is going to run Vic Fangio's defense. My question is, if you want Vic Fangio, why don't you hire Vic Fangio? But he's taking the year off.
Maybe next offseason it lines up perfectly.
Yeah. But when you start to figure that, I'm talking about expectations, Mike, and I'll leave it here with you. At Mike Gill Show, listen to Mike 97.3, ESPN South Jersey, 2 to 6 today. Drive time down there. You mentioned Gannon. You obviously have to talk about the quarterback. Nick Sirianni kind of going under the radar. Everybody's happy with Nick Sirianni, but if the expectations aren't met, obviously the head coach is going to start to feel the heat pretty quickly. So who do you think has the most to lose this year if the Eagles underachieve? You think it's the coach? You think it's the quarterback? You think it's the defensive coordinator?
Well, that's a good question. There's a 3-prong because the defensive coordinator was interviewing for head coaching jobs, and if his defense doesn't perform, that could hurt his job, his hireability as a guy that was the hot candidate. We've seen it before, locally. Greg Roman here was the name that was going to get head coaching jobs, and then all of a sudden his name just fell off the radar for head coaching jobs, as the offenses that he ran weren't, what he was in San Francisco when his name was the head. He was right there. He was getting head coaching job. Now I don't even think he's interviewed for head coaching jobs. So Gannon might be the guy that, has the most to lose in terms of his personal career, right? If our defense, you gave me Reddick, you got me Jordan Davis, I got Nakobe Dean, I went out and got James Bradbury. All of a sudden, I got a lot of toys that I didn't have last year, and I got head coaching jobs. So people must have liked what he did with Little last year. Now we got more. If you don't perform, does his hireability go down the drain a little bit? So in terms of personal, probably him. The question about Sirianni is interesting. Like, should this roster have more expectations, and are we holding our expectations back because this coach is such an unknown?
I think there's significant expectations. That's what I'm concerned with. I think they're a little bit overblown, the expectations. You think it's we're dampening, we're tampering, because that surprises me a little bit. I get that this.
Well, I mean, really I feel like you're right. I feel like people think this team is all of a sudden going to be pretty good again, but it's just not like irrationally like Super Bowl or bust kind of good.
It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out if Nick Sirianni goes down the Doc Rivers hole of, what do you mean expectations? There were no expectations coming into this year. I think Sirianni's smarter than that. Mike Gill, smart guy. When we're talking football, we appreciate it whenever you jump aboard with us. Thanks much. Go out and walk the beach again.
I got a guest for you today on my podcast, Jody.
Who's that?
Larry Colmus, man, the voice of the Triple Crown.
Very nice.
Oh, wow.
Horse racing today.
Little horse racing spot.
Those guys are tremendous.
I can't wait for this guy to tell his story, man. I can't. Horse racing announcers.
They're unbelievable.
That's a breed right there.
I have never attempted to do that, and I wouldn't even want to try.
Me neither.
It's impossible.
No, I think do it every day, and they get it right every single. So
they all sound the same.
It's impossible for you, John McMullen. It's impossible for me.
It's
impossible for Mike Gill. But they do it every single day across the country.
They all have the same cadence. I don't have that cadence. They all have it.
I can do the cadence. I just can't make out the 7-horse because of the color of silks on the backstretch through binoculars and be able to call them one after the other, after. That's the amazing part of it. Mikey Gill, we got to run. Appreciate you coming on board, bud. We'll get you back in a couple of weeks.
See ya.
Mike.